All right, guys, let us delve into the world of Elizabethan drama and the tragical history of Dr. Faustus. Now, it's important to note here um, a couple of things. There are two versions of this text. There is the A version, which was published in 1604, and a B text that was published in 1616. Um, Both published after Marlowe's death. Um, Happily enough, or ironically enough, I don't know, happily enough, whatever. Anyways, we are reading the A version, and the reason that we are reading the A version is, well, because it's the only one that's in your book, and B, it's shorter, and there's this kind of scholarly debate on whether or not which one is the more authorial, which one did Chris the to put it in a nutshell, there are pieces of the B text that may or may not have been added by Marlowe himself, so which was common in the time during the Renaissance period. So needless to say, we are reading the A text. And I decided to read a play by Christopher Marlowe versus our other bigwig Elizabethan dramatist, Shakespeare, because, well, for one, you guys are familiar with Shakespeare. You've read Shakespeare, and I wanted to introduce you to a playwright that you guys are probably unfamiliar with. Um, and Dr. Faustus is markedly shorter than any of Shakespeare's plays. So, um, we mentioned in the introductory historical context video that one of Queen Elizabeth's claim to fame is the Elizabethan theater. This is a huge booming time for the literature and arts, and the development of the theater comes a lot from the Protestant Reformation and through the kind of Renaissance learning and ideas. They were these open places for people to come together in a public sphere and really embrace knowledge. I mean, it was a place for all classes to kind of come together and enjoy the culture of the day. Um, I want to talk really quickly about this concept of humanism, which we talked about in the historical context, and the theater. And most playwrights, part of the kind of beauty, the subtlety of the theater was that it was an opportunity to both educate the kind of lower classes, but also to kind of make subtle suggestions to those who ruled in government. And it was a way to make suggestions to, and in some ways poke fun of, certain political figures in a way that wouldn't get them into trouble. And the one thing that comes from this is, remember, Queen Elizabeth kind of loosens this kind of idea of censorship through the public view of the theater and plays. But there's really kind of this aim to educate those who ruled in wise and virtuous government. And how do you teach a king? Well, very tactfully. You can't come out right and say things that are disrespectful to the crown, but you can offer alternative views of situations through through literature and the art. And the Elizabethan theater and humanism changes the nature of the moral from what we this So theater is not necessarily something that's new to the Renaissance or things like that, because in the medieval period we had the what we called morality plays, and it was a way of teaching kind of religion and moral views to people who couldn't read. But in the Renaissance, it changes the kind of moral nature or religious nature of plays to a more political virtue, instead of changing the techniques of drama. So um, we have our playwright Christopher Marlowe, and in he's a fascinating character, and he achieved a lot in his very young life. While he was being educated at Cambridge, he kind of got his literary claim to fame with his first play, the Tamburlaine the Great, which is basically a story of this Asian warlord who has this boundless appetite for conquest, which is not unlike our Faustus. And if you think about, well, I'll come back to that. Anyways, he is a predecessor of Shakespeare. And what I mean by that is he is writing plays before Shakespeare really gets um, on the scene, on the literary scene. And Christopher Marlowe is not only known for his plays, he also has this really rich kind of he writes all sorts of epics and poems, and which we'll read in our next week too. But the point that I'm trying to make with him being a predecessor of Shakespeare and the breadth of his literary works in such a short time frame is that had he lived, had he not died, especially the way that he died, he probably would have out Shakespeared Shakespeare. But during his short life, he was also part of Elizabeth I's Secret Service, because during her reign there were all sorts of plots to overthrow and get rid of her, and he basically was a spy for her. And he also had a reputation for being an atheist, and that does not necessarily mean what we think of an atheist as today. In the Renaissance or in Elizabethan England, an atheist could have simply been someone who denies God's goodness, or someone with unorthodox religious opinions, which, of course, looking at his play, Dr. Faustus, I think there's certainly some of Faustus and his kind of religious views that mirror Marlowe's own. But in 1593, he is arrested because rumors of his atheism he's not just, this kind of unorthodox character. They are more dangerous and strange. And he is ordered to show himself at the court on May 30th, but the ironically, or not necessarily ironically, unfortunately, before he is able to do that on, I think, May 28th, it might be May 29th. Anyways, he is killed in a bar fight, and rumor has it that it was over a bill, but there is more substantiating evidence that it was instead an assassination because of he was assassinated because of the work that he had done in Queen Elizabeth's service. So interesting life, interesting man, incredible poet, incredible author, and certainly doesn't get the kind of recognition that he deserves. So I'm going to stop here. Well, no, I'm not, because I'm going to talk a couple more minutes, and then I'm going to stop and pick up with our actual play. So, the tragical history of Dr. Faustus. I think it's important to note that Marlowe does not create the character of Faustus, nor does he kind of create this story. It is one that would have been familiar to him. I mean, you guys are probably all familiar with some version of the Faustus story, but this play is the first English translation of the German story of Dr. John Faustus, who was an actual real person. But he reinterprets this German story, and because of the Renaissance, the printing press, and this kind of rediscovery of classical literature, Marlowe is able to access this and make his own interpretation. So it's not original to him, but it is the most famous kind of first English interpretation of it, and it also inspired Goethe's story Faust in the 18th century. Anyways, the structure. Dr. Faustus does a couple of different things in terms of what type of play this is and what structure it takes. And in some ways, Dr. Faustus is a morality play. And it uses aspects of that medieval morality play by alternating comic and serious scenes, which is what a morality play does. And these comic scenes, which we'll see and we'll talk about, kind of reinforce the connection between magic and appetite. And it's a way to make these kind of abstract concepts of serious spiritual matters concrete or relatable to all members of the audience. And another, if you think about if Dr. Faustus is this morality play, it is a drama about the moral and struggles of everyday people. And this, certainly Dr. Faustus, as we shall talk about, is this kind of everyday man. He is every man, and we are meant to relate to him. Dr. Faustus, as noted in the title, The Tragical History of Dr. Faustus, it is also a tragedy. And Marlowe incorporates various elements of tragedy, but kind of upturns them and reinvents them and does something kind of interesting with the tragedy in this play. But there are classic Greek tragedy elements in this play. And typically, tragedies feature the death of an exceptional person, someone of nobility, of rank. And in a lot of ways, Faustus is this kind of exceptional man, even though he is kind of everyday. He is not. He is exceptional in his own mind, and he has these desires to be exceptional, and he is, I mean, it's kind of this Faustus is this kind of paradoxical powerful figure, but anyways, and this exceptional person of a tragedy is usually this protagonist who falls under hard times or has misfortunes because of a tragic flaw or weakness, and typically it is hubris or pride. And tragedies really show the causal connection of a character's actions, what they do, that kind of causes the catastrophe or the end. And they also feature a tragic hero, someone who is of noble birth, has a fatal flaw that affects their fate. Usually the tragic hero has a disrespect for the natural order of things. He is wounded by experience, and this fatal flaw causes a realization and discovery. However, it is much too late. And the downfall of the tragic hero causes pity or fear to an audience. So one of the questions that you might want to consider is Dr. Faustus a tragic hero? And I think that there's more than one way to interpret him as either this figure of tragedy or someone who is not to be pitied. So I am going to stop here, and I'm going to pick up with our prologue and our first couple of scenes, and Stay tuned.